It's May 14th, and investigative reporting has learned that Swaggy P's Game 4 podium shirt costs more than my rent. It's ClipperBlog Live, Andrew Hahn here, doing a uh, unwrapping, parsing out of the second round, the unexpected second round matchup between the Clippers and the Spurs. Joining me is Brooklyn's Charlie Widows.
What's going on?
Charlie, you weren't here for our first round wrap up, so why don't you give us a quick 30 seconds on how you feel about the Clippers in the second round?
Yeah, I was there in spirit with you guys. Listen, at this point, I'm trying to figure out how the Clippers are going to make it past Game 3, which everyone seems to think it's Spurs in 3.
The lock, put money on it.
If I had any money, Twitter tells me I should put it on the Spurs in 3. I'm not sure. It very well may be a Spurs win, a Spurs sweep, Spurs in 5, something like that. But it just, it's flawed logic to say the Clippers played X style of basketball or looked one way in the first round, when really that series was its own. It took on its own character. The Grizzlies are different from the Spurs. That they're not the Spurs. They may not be as good as the Spurs, but they're a different team. And I think the Clippers, frankly, what was kind of eye-opening to us is how the Clippers beat Memphis at their own game, or so the story goes. And, this is a new series. And I'm excited to look into, I'm obviously excited to see it. I'm excited to look into what's going to be different. I think it's going to be much more offensive, obviously, than a game in the 70s. As DJ said, I don't think we're going to see that. But let's take a look.
Yeah. Just as a quick aside, we've been talking about the Clippers and what their identity is this whole season, not really understanding what's going on with them because they had so many new pieces, trying to integrate everything together. Part of me feels like maybe the Clippers' identity is that of a chameleon. They just adapt to the style of whoever they're playing. If it's the Thunder, it's going to be a shootout, up and down style where they're going to match up small with them if they go small, or go big if they go big. If it's going to be with Memphis, then they're just going to send their bruisers, that goon mob, I think Kmart coined the bench, and just go out and bang with them. So I don't know, maybe their greatest identity right now is that of just playing however the other team wants to play and doing it well, beating them at their own game.
I think that's a really good point. And just before we get started, one quick thing is, the Clippers have depth, as we saw, maybe surprising depth, but each one of those kind of weapons has their limitations, and I think things played out the way that they hoped. Where the rebounding specialists contributed there and kind of made that work, and then the hustle guys, the defense guys, one of the wings stepped up, made the big shots when they needed them. And we'll see what happens in this series. Obviously, you're going against the master, the chess master in Popovich too. So you got to assume that they'll be ready for all those kinds of things.
Yeah. So I guess one of the big things that analysts are hanging their hat on in terms of a Spurs sweep or Spurs in 5 is that the Clippers looked so bad in the first round going against the Grizzlies, and a lot of people are saying, well, the Grizzlies really gave that series away. It was theirs to win, but they could never close it in the fourth quarter. What do you think about that, Charlie?
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think the series played out as, a lot of us predicted. I think it was a close series, and I think it was entertaining. And, I predicted the Clippers to win a close one, and I think a lot of other people did. You say they looked bad, and you might be right about that. Aesthetically, it didn't look good, and that was kind of by design, I think, the Grizzlies' style. But as we said, the Clippers can play that, and a bunch of us said it actually favored the Clippers. A close game, a slow game, that comes down to Chris Paul with the ball, and that generally makes the Clippers the team with the advantage.
Right. So the other thing that I wanted to add on to that is just, they were playing the Grizzlies after all. Many a pundit was saying that the Grizzlies were that chic dark horse pick to go to the Western Conference Finals, maybe even to the NBA Finals, and they're going to make teams look bad, especially because that's their style of play. I don't really understand how people are saying that the Clippers were so terrible when the Grizzlies could have they picked the Grizzlies to beat the Spurs with that style of play. So of course they're going to make the Clippers look bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you know, I think part of that is that people still have fresh in their mind what the Grizzlies did last year, and that wasn't a sustainable way. You know, Zach Randolph was one of the best players in basketball last year during the playoffs, and he isn't that. He's a good player, but he's not that. And the other thing is, I think there was kind of a narrative of like a backlash against the Clippers. You know, the flopping talk, the Blake Griffin has no post moves talk. And that's not true. None of that's true, as we know. I mean, maybe we can talk about flopping all the time if we want, but still, a team that's capable, as we saw, of beating a very good Grizzlies team.
Yeah, I wonder if it's kind of like people have a residual distaste to the Clippers, that a franchise that had been perennially so bad, suddenly doing really terrific things, and you don't really know where to direct that lingering resentment for the franchise, and you just kind of nitpick at them. It's pretty weird.
Sure, yeah, I think that played a little bit of part in it.
Yeah, and then, like you said, people kind of thinking back about Memphis last year. No, it almost feels like people don't really pay attention to the regular, especially this regular season where games were going every single night. They just kind of they maybe catch a couple of games and get this idea of like, yeah, the Spurs are the Spurs. They're playing that fundamental style that they like to play, and little do they know that their defense has slid a little bit, and now they're a much more athletic run-and-gun team.
Right, and I think the other thing about that is nothing made that misconception more clear, as the Clippers can be called Lob City, but that's not their style of play. They don't run like they did last year. They're not high flying. They can dunk. They're athletic, but they're not. That's not how they choose to play. So, narratives kind of take over, and I think people, until they watch a series where each game involves adjustments and kind of the true style of a team really comes out, you don't really know. And a lot of people didn't really understand what makes the Clippers who they are.
Right. So I've written a bunch of random topics that we're gonna just shoot down in no particular order. If you see something that you want to run with, then by all means tell me, because the next question is not going to relate to it in any way.
I gotcha.
The second round, because the Lakers and the Clippers went to 7 games in that first round, has been kind of compressed for the Western Conference. They're going to play 4 games in 6 days, and the games 3 and 4 in LA, the supposed home court advantage for the Clippers, are going to be played back-to-back. What do you think about that schedule, and how do you feel it helps or hurts one team?
Yeah, I think it's a, I don't know if you know either way, if things were equal. Problem is they're not equal because the Clippers are banged up, and that has to be the story of this series. Caron Butler's banged up. Blake Griffin is probably the most hobbled with his sprained knee. And then Paul, the thing about Chris Paul is that if you really pay attention, he's relied less and less on athleticism ever since his first knee injury. So he's kind of evolved into a style of play where he doesn't depend on that anymore, which I think helps him prepare for this kind of thing. As it relates to the back-to-back home games, I do think it's crazy that in the second round of the playoffs you're playing back-to-back games. On the other hand, the Spurs aren't young, so maybe that kind of equalizes it a little bit. Obviously, in any of these series, call it short or long, but games 1 and 2 set the tone. If the Clippers can steal one in San Antonio, I think is more important than how games 3 and 4 are going to play out.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of tying together your idea of the Clippers being hurt and wanting to steal one of those first 2 games, I've been toying with this idea of maybe sitting Chris Paul and Blake Griffin for game 1.
You're talking crazy.
Clearly, Chris Paul and Blake are not 100%, and maybe getting those, I think it would be 3 extra days of just sitting them for the first game, maybe that does bring them back to 85, 90, 95%, and they can go ahead and go after that second game. Disagree?
Yeah, I disagree with that. I think that's a Greg Popovich regular season kind of thought process there. You can't do that, obviously, in a playoff series. Plus, I mean, maybe things would be different if you knew that both of those guys would be 100%. But you don't punt the game in the playoffs. You can't do that in a series like this.
I mean, I had the same notion in Game 6 of the first round, where the Clippers were at home, but the Chris Paul and Blake Griffin were freshly injured. And I said, maybe it's better if you just sat them for Game 6 and played them for Game 7, because clearly the Clippers had shown that they could win in Memphis. The Clippers in the regular season blew out the Spurs in San Antonio. So, and I know that there's not a lot of stock we can put into the regular season because so many of the rosters changed, and I think Tony Parker didn't play that game either.
Well, sure, and we can say, we can wonder about the importance of regular season games. I do think it's interesting that somehow people forget that the Clippers not only beat the Spurs, but almost beat them twice.
Right, that fluke turnover game.
Yeah, I mean, whether they won or lost, they played them close. And obviously the Spurs have changed, but the Clippers have changed. The Clippers, obviously Nick Young's the only significant addition.
Kenyon Martin and Reggie Evans, I don't think played meaningful minutes during those games.
Right, and that's where I'm going with this is they've grown. They've whether it's lineups together, whether it's Vinny Del Negro becoming more comfortable with who he's playing together. The Clippers are a different team, even though the faces may look similar. And obviously the Spurs have added Steven Jackson and Boris Diaw, which has impacted their rotation.
Don't forget Patty Mills.
Patty Mills.
That Australian wonder.
Yes. It's funny to me. I think people really get caught up in how good the Spurs were during the regular season and how obviously different their series looked in the first round than the Clippers. But, these are the Spurs. These are the Spurs who were the number 1 seed last year. And people thought that there was no way Memphis could beat them. And 1 year later, it's like we're all forgetting that.
Right. And it's just like with the Clippers versus Memphis. Memphis has this defined defensive system. They know who they are. They know what they do. But everyone all agreed the Clippers have the best player on the court. And that axiom holds true again for the second round. The Spurs have this defined system. It's Greg Popovich, the best coach in the NBA. But again, you would say the Clippers have the best player on the court. Do you think the same thing could happen again then?
Yeah, I do. I obviously still think that holds true. I think that holds true against every team but the Heat, and that's a whole different story. But the Clippers have some depth that I don't think the Heat have, and quality depth. As we're talking about what the Spurs' identity and what they want to do, they shoot it well. They score it.
They shoot it phenomenally well.
Right? That's what they do. And the Clippers, technically you're looking at two teams that are very efficient offensively. The thing is, and this is where Spurs fans have every reason to be confident, is that they rely on a system that works, and they have guys that know their roles. Whereas the Clippers, their numbers look great for the regular season, but it's really their system is Chris Paul. And, A, he's hobbled. B, when you're going against a team like San Antonio with a coach like Pop, you can count on them being ready to neutralize one thing, and that's kind of the name of the game in these series is how you're going to adjust to that. Do they double Chris Paul? Do they get the ball out of his hand? Do they decide Chris Paul's not going to get by us because he's not quite as explosive, so we don't double him, and force guys on the wings to beat them? And to me, that's the series comes down to, the Spurs have Bonner, Steven Jackson, Gary Neal, Danny Green, these guys who are knockdown shooters. The Clippers have guys who can shoot threes, but a lot of them, guys like Foy, Mo Williams, even Caron Butler when he's going, some of those guys tend to not just think of themselves as shooters in those roles. Sometimes they're slashers, sometimes they're, you know, wing point guards, and frankly, none of them are well suited to do that. So you know you don't see Matt Bonner trying to break people down off the dribble. Um,
I would
you
love
might
to
see
see
that
that.
with yeah, right. That looks a lot like Charlie Widows, and it doesn't look good. Um, you know, you also Gary Neal might, but you know, he's to me he's a poor man's Eric Gordon, so I'm scared of what he can do off the dribble.
Let me spring this question on you. The Clippers basically run that double pick and roll. They send the two guys up and let Chris Paul kind of decide which guy he wants to run which screen he wants to run his man off of, and goes up to that 15-foot elbow range and pulls off that fadeaway shot that seems like he hits 100% of the time. Um, Aaron McGuire of 48 Minutes of Hell wrote this terrific preview of Spurs and Clippers, saying that that's basically what they ran in 2008 when the Hornets faced the Spurs then. But Chris Paul was a mid-30s% shooter from that range that time. He's much better this time. That's not my question, though. I just wanted to point that part out.
Yeah, and check out that preview. They do a good job over there.
Yeah, it's a terrific preview.
Yeah.
Why can't Mo Williams do that? Why can't they run that same double pick and roll for him? It seems like Mo is pretty good from that 15-foot range as well.
Sure.
What's stopping them from doing that?
Well, I mean, I think sometimes we forget that the key to pick and roll, being the pick and roll ball handler, is decision making. You know, plenty of guys, plenty of two guards in the NBA or combo guards or even point guards made a lot of money making shots off of screens. I mean, that's what you do in college and high school. You know, you get to the free throw line and you knock down a jumper. In the NBA, the defense on pick and rolls is so nuanced that it's all about decision making. So the way Chris Paul gets that space, keeps the defense off balance, knowing that he can hit the guy on the wing or feed the guy in the post. You know, that's what separates him. Mo Williams is not a creative ball handler like that, and you know, he's kind of one dimensional in that situation. That's why they're not swappable.
Speaking of a complete aside again, just going off on a different topic, Chris Paul's decision making and his ball handling skills. Charlie Wood was president of the Eric Bledsoe fan club. How happy do you feel when you see Eric Bledsoe probing into that paint, slowing down and kind of putting that defender on his hip after he's beaten him, and then slowly backing his way? It's like such a Chris Paul move that he's picked up.
I thought about that. You know, I was watching my family and we were talking about just he really looked like he'd learned some things from Chris Paul. It was beautiful. The Game 7 was amazing. I think Bledsoe was amazing. But as we've talked about, I've not hidden my affection for his game. But he was also tailor-made for that series, I think. You know, Memphis isn't going to beat you with threes. They're not going to really try to run in the half court, and they want to play a defense up and down physical style game. That's him. That's Bledsoe. Against the Spurs, you know, the Clippers don't want to run either, really, unless they're getting turnovers. And when he's in the game, you know, he's kind of a one-man pressure defense. But you got to assume that Greg Popovich has something for Eric Bledsoe, and I've seen him grow this year. I think we all have, and I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how much confidence Vinny Del Negro has in him after the last series. You'd assume increased confidence, but I don't know how much he's going to play. He's juggling, you know, at least Randy Foye, Mo Williams, and Bledsoe. Throw Nick Young into that mix. You don't know what happens with Caron Butler. You just don't know where the minutes are going to come. And so, to me, Bledsoe had the ball in his hands. He was empowered. He was running the show with the second unit, and he was getting to the rim. I would assume that San Antonio would make things a little more difficult, maybe make him shoot, but he's quick. So who knows? I mean, to me, he's obviously always someone to watch.
Right. So let's go ahead and talk about some of these role players then. DeAndre Jordan, Randy Foye, a lot of ineffective players that Memphis kind of took out of the equation in the last series. How do you feel about... let's bring that back on. How do you feel about their chances in this series with a very different San Antonio Spurs team?
Yeah, I mean, I think DeAndre was, as always, enigmatic, where I thought he was the key to Game 2, or one of the keys to Game 2, really bothering Gasol and
Kind
kind
of
of denying him the
disappeared for a
ball.
couple of games after that.
Yeah, right. And then I thought he was awesome in Game 7 as well.
Right.
You know, he hasn't, again, in most matchups he'll have the athletic advantage, but he you know, against this team, he's going against Duncan's great, he's smart, he's Tim Duncan, but DeAndre should have, you know, the physical advantage again. And to me, what was so special about Game 7 was that because of DeAndre and then Martin and Evans, you saw the little guys come in and get those rebounds because DeAndre was engaged, he was blocking guys out, creating space, keeping them off the boards. Now, the Clippers should have a rebounding advantage in this series, which I don't think they had in too many of the games against Memphis.
Best case scenario, they probably just broke even with Memphis.
Yeah, and a lot of that came off of just, you know, Reggie Evans coming in and dominating dirt while he was in there. So I guess in terms of the bigs, I'm going to be interested to see how they come out in a series where they're not going to get punched as early and as often as they did against Memphis. You know, if I'm the coach, maybe I say, hey guys, why don't you set that tone that we just saw we can play, and see if we can use up those fouls, see if we can try to bully those guys, because, you know, at this point it's Boris Diaw, it's Tim Duncan, it's Splitter and Blair who didn't play as much as the other two in the first round, and the Clippers should have an advantage, especially size-wise.
So you think that the Clippers can just take that Memphis grit and grind style that they seem to have mastered by Game 7 and just apply it to the San Antonio Spurs?
Yeah, I mean, and my dad actually pointed this out. He noticed in Vinny Del Negro's post-game conference, a lot of times Vinny would say things like, we need to answer, we need to respond. And my dad's point was, why not set the tone? And maybe against Memphis it doesn't really apply, but against the Spurs, you know, I think that they can do that with those bigs. Talking about guys like Foy, who wasn't great. You know, he wasn't really built for that series in Memphis. Those guys are just really good on the perimeter. I mean, that's what they make their money on. That's how they got so far. And this series will be different. You know, Foy's one of those guys where he can really be a difference maker shooting. And same with Mo, and same with Nick Young. And in that case, you know, those guys are definitely a key.
Would you want to have the Clippers get into a three-point shootout with the Spurs? I think the Spurs were one of the top three-point shooting teams, right?
Right. No, I mean, obviously you don't want to get into a shootout, but that doesn't mean, you know, the Clippers want to stop the Spurs from shooting, and then they want to play to their own strengths. You know, Andrew McNeil wrote today about how kind of it's going to be a battle for which team gets to the shots that they want. You know, the corner three and shots at the rim. With the Clippers, they can shoot threes, but they also tend to fall in love with the long two, which just isn't a good shot, you know, in general. And again, look, we were talking about knowing their roles. The Clippers, guys like Butler, guys like Mo Williams, guys like Foy, are prone to the pump fake, step in, and all of a sudden it's a 22-footer as opposed to a nice, comfortable, in-rhythm three-point shot. And to me, that's going to be big. You know, Mo Williams kind of perfected the mid-range jumper, but the other guys, you know, it's just not an efficient way to go. And obviously, defensively, the number one thing is you cannot let those guys, the Spurs, get the corner three.
Right. Going back to the bigs for a second, I think it was Pop that developed that hack-a-shack technique to kind of neutralize the front court advantage. And the Clipper bigs are notoriously bad at free throw shooting. Do you think that they're going to go to that a lot to kind of neutralize the physical nature of the I can't believe we're saying physical nature of the Clippers front line.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think DJ mentioned this in ClipperBlog Live after Game 7. I don't think it's going to be, you know, overt. I don't think it's as soon as they cross half court, hack them. But I also think that they're smart enough to not give up easy layups and know that really all four of the Clipper bigs that play our liabilities at the line. The thing is, DeAndre Jordan doesn't get post touches, so it's not like he's going to get hacked. I think Blake Griffin's going to face similar treatment. I don't think that the San Antonio post defenders are anything like what Memphis is, but he's going to have to work for his. And then again, none of these. The thing that makes the Clippers bigs hard to like just foul is they're not really that involved in the offense. It's a lot of Chris Paul dribbling around, a lot of pick and roll and stuff like that. Where if Reggie Evans is gonna get a look, it's gonna be at the rim, and it's I guess you could foul him, but they only have a certain amount of fouls. I do think that's where guys like Blair and Splitter come in. Those guys have 6 fouls, and to me that's one of the big advantages that those, or maybe that's one of the weapons that they have coming into the series.
Do you think officiating played a pretty big role in the last series? Do you see it playing another big factor in this one? Do you imagine that they're going to call it tighter or similar to the last series?
I mean, I think that's tough to predict, but it's the playoffs, and a call here or there can change things. I think, talk about flopping. The Spurs have Manu Ginobili on their team, and they have Tim Duncan, who is great at working the refs, just like any superstar, like Chris Paul. So it'll be a story. Everything's magnified.
All right.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to call it as tight. It was a wrestling match for 7 games against the Grizzlies, and I just don't know if it's going to be that way against the Spurs.
Right, a wrestling match for the first 5 games, and then just a full-out fight for the last 2.
Right. A steel cage.
So, let's wind this down a little bit. What is your prediction for this second round?
Let's see. I took the Clippers in 7 before I knew that they were going to win.
What? Like the only person on the planet taking the Clippers. Please try to explain.
But here's the thing. For anyone who took the Spurs in 7, I don't mind that. I think that makes a lot of sense to me. I think Aaron said, once it gets to Game 7, anything can happen. And I don't see it. And this all kind of goes out the window if Blake or Chris Paul are really, really hobbled. But I like, again, the best player on the court, and I think Blake Griffin showed that he will be relentless, and I think he's going to have to be again. But there's just something about the guys who won that last series for them. Kenyon Martin, I think he's going to be a big factor. And it's funny, I took part in a preview for 48 Minutes of Hell, and they said, what area could the Clippers, I guess, what did they say? What advantage, what area could the Clippers beat the Spurs in? And actually, I think defense, which is crazy to say. But
clearly we've been talking to a crazy man for the
right? I promise I haven't been drinking. If Vinny can get those combinations out there that are just, relentless and energetic and smart with their rotations, because the primary difference offensively between the Spurs and the Grizzlies is the Grizzlies aren't going to make you rotate. They're not going to move the ball around, look for open looks, unless they get it into Marc Gasol. And you saw how the Clippers could kind of take them out of that. The Spurs are going to really work the ball, and they're going to make the defense work. And I just think if the Clippers set the tone physically, that could change things. I don't know. I mean, Spurs in 5 wouldn't surprise me, but I think that if Blake can play and if Chris Paul's healthy enough, I would say they do Clippers in 7.
Would you be comfortable if you just let Reggie Evans or DeAndre Jordan just sit on Duncan and let Duncan go off? If he's going to have a great game, he's going to have a great game. Just refuse to double him and stay at home on all those 3-point shooters?
Yeah, you guys stay at home. Yeah, I mean,
kind of the Dwight Howard strategy to neutralize Orlando.
Duncan's not Duncan what he used to be, but he's still so smart. And if there's anything that DeAndre Jordan is susceptible to. It's just pump fakes and footwork and awareness, that kind of stuff. And it's such a mismatch in Duncan's favor.
Yeah, if we could just nail DeAndre's foot to the ground to keep him from going after all this pump fakes.
Right. Yeah. If DeAndre gets exposed, but then you bring in Kenyon Martin, and he's the opposite of that in my mind. He's smart on defense. He's physical.
So much smaller though.
Sure. Yeah.
I guess I'll go Spurs in 7, but like you said, if you're picking a Game 7, then you're really just saying it's a coin flip. The Clippers have proven that they can beat teams on the road, so home court isn't going to be quite the same. And I'm not exactly sure, but it seems like the Grindhouse might have been a more active home court advantage for that Memphis squad than San Antonio was. Where are they? The AT&T Center?
Yeah, I think no longer the SBC Center.
Something. There's somewhere in San Antonio.
Telecommunications company that sponsors that building.
And last question. Everyone wants to know this. Charlie Money Widows. The Spurs, I believe the last I checked, the Spurs are... Oh, I should preface this. We do not advocate sports betting of any kind or gambling. It's terrible. But the Spurs are minus 3,000 to win the series. And I think the Clippers are plus 1,400.
And I don't even know what that means. Those numbers are so big, and I think all I know is that the plus goes the other way. So if you're plus, that's a bad thing.
So the Spurs are 30-1. You have to put $30 to win $1 for them to win the series. And if you bet $1 on the Clippers, you'll win $14. How do you feel about those odds? You have $1 to spend?
If I had any money, I think I might put a little bit on the Clippers. There are two things at play. A, that the Spurs have been awesome, and everyone has known that, and they're that team this year that's considered the juggernaut. From a Clipper perspective, they're also the team that won 20 games in a row against the Clippers or something.
Right. I think it was like 18 of the last 20 or something like that.
Right. Well, that's changed, and the Clipper wins have come recently, and it's gone are the days when every Clipper Spurs game was a 30-point San Antonio win. So I don't know. I mean, obviously nothing would surprise me with this team, as I've said 1,000 times. But if I had a couple bucks, I might put some on put one to win 14.
Right. Okay. Let's wrap this up. So, Charlie, thanks for giving us your insights.
Thanks, Andrew.
For Charlie Widows, I'm Andrew Hahn. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you after tomorrow, Game 1 of the second round of the NBA playoffs.
Looking forward to it.